Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. So behind me is a statue of Edward VII, who gives his name to the Edwardian era. Now, he only reigned from January 1901 to May 1910, but the Edwardian era is usually taken to be right up to 1914, the outbreak of the First World War. He was born in Buckingham Palace in 1841, and he was the first monarch born in Buckingham Palace, indeed. So his mother was Queen Victoria, and his father was Prince Albert, the Prince Consort. Victoria and Albert, they were first cousins. So she was Queen Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, and he was he was a Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, but obviously she was a Hanoverian. And her mother had been Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. So a very Germanic family, but obviously they spoke fluent English as well as German. So Edward VII, he was brought up by private tutors, notably a Scottish Army officer called James Bruce. He had a difficult relationship with his father. He's quite fractious, Edward VII. Prince Albert, he was only Prince Consort. He wasn't to be king because he married Queen Victoria, who got to be a prince. He didn't get to be a king. So a woman takes her husband's dignities, a man doesn't take his wife's dignities. So he did what he could in this role to raise the level of art, education, science, technology, and so on in Germany. Now, Germany might have been much better at the arts in those days, but I don't think it was better at science and technology. The United Kingdom was way out in front to begin with. The first country to industrialize obviously fell back, was overtaken by the United States and then Germany. So Edward VII, he wasn't an erudite sort. He was more of a bon viveur and a reprobate. So he went to Cambridge, where he was closely supervised by tutors, more or less spied upon, and they didn't like his hard drinking ways, his use of bad language, his gambling on the GGs, obviously always attending horse races, and his womanizing, going to Ireland. Obviously the whole of Ireland were part of the United Kingdom at the time, being an officer in the British Army. And then he went to the United States just before the outbreak of the American Civil War. And indeed, the American Revolution was just within living memory. And he was the first member of the British royal family to visit America since William IV, who'd been in New York during the American Revolution. But anyway, it could have been cataclysmic, but in fact he was quite well received. He was a bit of a Prince Harry figure, as in unscholarly, a wild child, but as a clown prince he still went down very well. He put people at their ease. He was certainly very approachable. He was unpretentious, and he was not afflicted by the pomposity that you found in other princes and princesses. So who was he to marry? Well, he married Princess Alexandra of Denmark. A fairly successful marriage. They had several children, but that he was not faithful to his wife. I was trying to think who was a famous mistress of his, who is the ancestress of Camilla Parker Bowles. Then her name will come to me. Is it Lillie Langtry? And there was one with a Dutch surname as well. I don't remember her name. So that was him. So 1861, his father died just after the outbreak of the American Civil War, which he had helped to avert. And his father had made no secret with his son of how bitterly he disappointed with his son's wild ways. So Edward VII was very fond of France and spent an awful lot of time there. He was sometimes satirized by the French press. He's going to Balmoral in Aberdeenshire because his mother bought Balmoral, a private estate in Scotland, just after the death of her husband in 1861, and that affected very badly because theirs was not just a dynastic marriage, it really was a love match. So she went into deepest mourning, wear black all the time, turning down any invitations to socialise, making public appearances only when she felt these were constitutionally obligatory. And people called her the Widow of Windsor, not even coming to London most of the time, residing at Windsor principally. And so Republican clubs grew. Some people thought they ought to do away with the monarchy, so he had to step into his mother's shoes, take over more of the role. He was elevated to the title of Prince of Wales. So Prince of Wales is not automatically the title for the heir to the throne. He or she is then invested as Prince of Wales. They don't get it from the moment of birth. And he did travel around Wales, and that's why a Welsh poet, I can't remember his name, penned the words from our lovely mountains and from our ancient dales, oh let the prayer re-echo, God bless the Prince of Wales, and so on. You may know the melody to it. Anyway, so what was he doing after that time? Well, one of the famous things he did in 1876, if memory serves, was to go to India, because Disraeli was Prime Minister at the time, and he decided that that Queen Victoria ought to be the Empress of India. So he passed this Royal Titles Bill, it became a Royal Titles Act, and they held a Durbar at Delhi. Durbar could mean a palace, or can be like a coronation. And so just north of Old Delhi, they had the Emperor's camp, and there were obviously hundreds of tents, and India had many princes, Maharajas, Rajas, Gaikwars, Shahs, Khans, and I can't remember the other titles, Nawabs, and they gathered hundreds and hundreds of them to do homage to him one by one, to recognize the paramountcy of his mother as Empress of India. She never visited, and they did it to him in her stead. So that was that, and then he sailed back to the United Kingdom. So he had travelled the world. He'd also trained to be a naval officer. The royal family was very closely associated with the Royal Navy, the senior service. So that was that. Anyway, 1901, his mother died, and obviously he inherited the crown and tried to keep relations good between all the different countries. But by this time, his marriage with his wife was not very good, and they were making their public appearances. He could be unfaithful to her. She couldn't be unfaithful to him, because if she conceived a child, this baby would be presumed to be his, and he or she could succeed to the crown. So it'd be an attempt on the throne for her to have an extramarital liaison. Anyway, he tried to be a referee in this dirty game of politics and to keep out of it. People sometimes talk about an Edwardian crisis these days. The Second South African War came to an end in May 1902. The United Kingdom won that, but with little glory. And people said that locking up Boer civilians was a wrongful thing to do, even though it was saving them from being killed by marauders or dying of malnutrition, exposure, and so forth. And there was increasing trades union militancy. There were lots of strikes. The Labour Party became a major force. And then there was obviously a crisis over the budget, the Lloyd George budget, the people's budget, introducing super tax or surtax on the very wealthy and so on, graduated income tax where you pay more proportionately the more money you earn and so forth, to set up the beginnings of a welfare state, at the same time as funding the Anglo-German naval race of a huge expansion of the Royal Navy. So holding Buckingham Palace conferences to try and bang heads together, and when the Liberals won a second election, like his ancestor William IV, saying to the Tories, if you block this in the House of Lords, I will simply create hundreds of peers of the opposite party, and they'll be able to vote it through the House of Lords. So that was that Parliament Act of 1910, saying there would be no more money bills for that would go before the House of Lords, and the House of Lords could delay things by only 2 years. So was he interfering? Was that constitutionally inappropriate? It's debatable. And then he died well before the year was out. And obviously Home Rule was a looming thing. So that is him. He's obviously buried in Windsor Castle in St George's Chapel. His wife, Queen Alexandria, survived him by quite some years. She helped set up the Queen Alexandra Corps of Nurses in the army. So, well, he was the penultimate monarch of this country to wear a beard. You see him here, this equestrian statue, wearing one of his many army uniforms. He's the Colonel-in-Chief of many regiments of the British Army, and indeed in the German Army, because relations between them were quite good. Although Kaiser Wilhelm II didn't like him, calling him Fat Old Wales, as he was Prince of Wales. He was rather keen on sailing, Edward VII. Like his collateral ancestor William IV, the Sailor King, going to Cowes for Cowes Week. Cowes, as in a town on the Isle of Wight, on the southern coast of England, and every August there's a huge regatta there. So yachting was much more popular for the super wealthy back those days. Proper yachting, using the sails, no engines on the ships. And of course, travel was much slower in those days. These days, the jet set, they'd be holidaying in the Caribbean or Thailand, or if they're going not very far afield, it'd be like La Côte d'Azur. But in those days, they're often sailing around the British Isles, across to Norway and so on. And he took his grocer onto his yacht with him. And Wilhelm II, being a crashing snob, thought this was really, how to put it, in for a dig, to allow a grocer onto your yacht if you're a king. Well, that is Edward VII, sorely missed.